Welcome to the Beyond the Sound podcast. Here at Beyond the Sound, we explore and discuss music and arts happenings in the Salvation Army Northwest Division, serving Washington State, Northern Idaho, and Western Montana. I am your host, John Opina, Divisional Music and Gospel Arts Director, and this is episode 16, all the way from the Opina studio. I am working from home today, so I am recording this podcast. And we have a special guest all the way from THQ, and I'll let him introduce himself and what he does there.
Yeah, it's great to be here. My name's Kevin Larsson, and about 3.5 years ago, I started working at THQ, and I am the Territorial Creative Development Director, which is, I guess, quite an ambiguous name, really, but it just means like I'm in the music department, and I'm kind of looking after all the kind of the creative elements within that music department. You know, writing some music here, there, and everywhere for different events, and just kind of having some other creative inputs to some of the program stuff they put on here. Before that, I was the DMD, so for Southern Cal for 20 years. So I've had a lot of experience there in the Salvation Army music side of things.
Yeah, before we get into some of the questions that I sent you,
sure.
Keith and I were actually talking about this when he got to Golden State, that sometimes, you know, music ministry is a really long burn. I say that quite often. And sometimes, at least for me, I can kind of get down on myself of like, am I impacting people's lives in a positive way? And you know, when he got to Golden State, he was telling me the people who he was playing with in his kettle groups, you know, like Lillian, Colin and Curtis Helms. And I'm just thinking, oh man, you know, 10 years ago, you know, I was giving those folks lessons. Do you have like stories like that? Maybe just one or two examples of just like people you were working with back in your time as a DMD over the 20 years and kind of seeing them now still involved in music ministry. Can you name a couple?
Yeah. Well, that was one of the. I was going to kind of use this example when you're talking about, you know, one of the future questions about kind of the highlights of music camps and stuff like that. No, it's fine. But one of the ones that kind of jumped immediately to my mind was working with the various staffs there at the music camps and all this kind of stuff. And that such an important ministry part of it is not just going there and looking after the kids and teaching the kids. Obviously, that's a very important part, but it's also the ministry within the staff itself. And some of the highlights of that were a lot of these young people that had been students that have been growing up in the music camps that we were able to kind of work with and minister to, and then they all became the staff members. And I've got to say that those staff members, the ones that we'd mentored before, they were the best years at music camp, because we were just kind of one team. We'd all worked together, grown together in different ways throughout this, and there was just so many of them. I mean, this is back in the day when we had like staffs of 45 people, and so many of them, over 50-60% were all those young people that had come through and stuff like that. So they're still actively involved in music. Maybe not necessarily kind of in Southern Cal Division, in the Salvation Army even, but still kind of doing their thing kind of all over the world, really, that's just a great encouragement. And I loved it, so you can see the fruits of your labor, it's great.
Could you point to like some golden years? Like obviously like every year is great, but were there particularly a couple years here and there where there's like, man, those are really memorable years?
I think of the musicals that we put on. We were privileged to be asked to write the musical for the 150th anniversary of the International Congress, and that process, which lasted a couple of years building up to that would have been certainly very memorable. Extremely hard work, because the other work that you do doesn't stop. This is just an additional thing that you do there. So I guess 2015. But there was another one before that, which was extremely memorable, because we put on a musical for our Spanish-speaking cause as well, and we put on Spirit, Espíritu, and that was that would have been a real highlight, I would have said. Again, the whole thing kind of encompassed a few years, really, because we started off with a Latino choir. The first rehearsal, we had maybe like 15 or something, but by the third rehearsal, we were up into the 90s, almost 100 members of this choir. And as it carried on growing, we decided we'd put on this musical, and that was a year-long project, and we recorded the whole thing and stuff. And Yeah, and it was a great kind of performance in the end. But one of the things that really impacted me, which makes it memorable, is when all the members were just saying thank you for giving us this community. You know, some of the the hard work they've been putting into and stuff like that. So that was really appreciated. And still, when I go to the Latino cause now, they keep on coming up and giving me big hugs and stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
I remember at the time it was Jackie was pregnant with Ethan, so they did baby showers and all this kind of stuff. It's wonderful. So I was at Santana the weekend or 2 weekends ago, and it was so good to see some of those people still there and still awesome. Remembering. Yeah. So there you go. There's a couple of highlights.
So the Boundless musical, that took 2 years to kind of put in production. That was a 2-year process.
Yeah. I would say so. Not necessarily all my involvement. So the way that would work, there was 3 of us kind of in charge of the whole thing. So it would be me writing the music, but then we had Keith Banks, Commissioner Keith Banks. He wrote all the lyrics, and it's my brother who wrote the books, all the different stories and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Now, to get to that point with this typical musical, it was quite a process, because what the whole musical was about is we're highlighting a few different stories. We settled on 8 different stories of people who have gone kind of above and beyond in the ministry of the Salvation Army, doing kind of various incredible things. So that research took quite a bit of time. That wasn't necessarily me. That would have been kind of Keith with his experience. He came up with some that he'd even heard about, that was involved in. My brother would do a lot of research. So then that all starts, and then my brother would then write the stories, figure out where the musics or the songs are going to go. Then that would go to Keith. He would write the lyrics, at which point then it would come to me. Then I'd write the music. But then all of this had to be done, months and months before it was kind of obviously due to perform, because then we had to start rehearsing, recording, do all these things. That's why it's a 2-year project. It's a big one, but it's an exciting thing, from starting with just a single thought. In fact, we weren't settled on this at all. My brother was looking at maybe writing an original story. We were maybe looking at doing one inspired by scripture. I was looking at King David, maybe, although his story doesn't finish that great. It would be a difficult one to kind of put, what's the big finale of David's story? Well, it's a tough one. So then anyway, we settled on kind of this idea. And so even just get there, that was probably a few months. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a creative in that way. So I have no knowledge of how long that takes. It's just, I get it. And okay, let's just put it on. So yeah, it's interesting to get some background.
Yeah. I mean, because it's so much of it before even the music hits. That's the long process.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we usually start the podcast with some top 3s. It's usually been about food. We can get into food if we want, because SoCal there's a lot of good stuff. But let's start. You're a football fan now. 2 Americans here. That's soccer.
Yes. Now I wasn't when you sent me what's my top 3 football moments. I was thinking, now what's he talking about here? Is he talking soccer or is he talking football? So I settled on soccer because I would struggle to find 3 football moments.
So top 3 soccer moments as a soccer fan. What would they be for you?
Well, I'm going to go with a bit of a soccer fan and as a soccer player. I'm still playing. I still play every week. I still do it on a Monday night. So tonight, so that's when the time we're recording this, I'm going to be going to play, which is always good fun. So now they're my top 3 moments. The first one is a playing one. So that is, I used to go to a university called Colchester Institute. So this would have been in the mid-90s, and it was a lot of Salvationists in this university. It was because we all went there because there was this instructor, Michael Clack. He was the bandmaster of Chalk Farm, but also just this legend in Salvation Army music. He was the guy that always played the organ at the big Royal Albert Hall things and stuff. So anyway, loads of Salvationists used to end up going to Colchester. But we, as a music department, we used to love just playing soccer. So we used to go out there all the time, and it was all the Salvationists there. We had a really good time. But then there was an inter kind of class soccer tournament, and we entered into this soccer tournament, these 5 music students. It was 5 aside, and in the final we we were doing really well. We got into the final, and we actually played the reserve team of the local professional team.
Okay.
They were all part of the Culture Institute. These were all, going to be kind of players. I don't know whatever happened to them, but we won. We beat them. These 5 Salvation Army, just musicians, and we went into the final, and we beat these. I don't know. They were hoping to be pros, but so that was quite good. It went to penalties in the end, but we won, so we'll take that. So that is one of my highlights there. Nick Simmons-Smith would have been part of that group as well.
I was just about to ask if there's anyone in there that we would know.
Yeah, there was, and another guy, Stephen Byrne. Do you know Stephen Byrne?
Yeah,
he was the DMD over, and he would have been there. Duncan Sutton. He didn't make the cut, unfortunately. Yeah, in fact, he might have gone by that time. Another guy called Mark Cracknell as well. He was another Salvation. And then we brought in someone else who was an Army. But yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's one highlight. Another one would have been watching Manchester United win their first Champions League in kind of this era against Bayern Munich. That was a kind of a crazy game when United were 1 behind all the way until stoppage time, and then we scored 2 quick goals. And I'm a big Manchester United fan. But the other memory of that one is that I got to enjoy watching that with Chris Mallett. Chris Mallett was a big United fan, so I went over his house and we were watching that together, and that was pretty cool, I would say.
Yeah.
And then the other highlight is kind of always watching my boys play. We did that for years. They went into the AYSO. That's the one. AYSO from when they were very young. Aiden started a bit younger than Ethan. Ethan would have probably been 8. Aiden might have been 6 when they started playing.
Oh, wow.
I was coaching that as well. But then we did that every Saturday and rehearse, practice throughout the week for years and years and years. And I still love it. Yeah, any chance I get to go and watch them play, I'll still be doing that. So that's another big highlight.
Yeah, I remember because at WMI we usually do the staff camper game or soccer match, and I'm pretty sure it was Ethan when he was on the field. I just kept grabbing his shirt, and he kept on getting mad. Oh. He's like, "Stop grabbing my shirt!" And I just said, "Hey, well, stop running, man. I can't run with you. You got to slow down."
Yeah, I know. Both of them are just really, really good. They're better than I ever was and stuff like that. Although, hopefully, they won't listen to this because I never tell them that actually. Sure. But there's no question about that.
Yeah, well, I didn't grow up playing soccer. I grew up playing regular American football. And so my soccer moments are pretty much tied to certain players. I'm a big Ronaldo fan, Cristiano Ronaldo fan. So all his years spent in Manchester United, I followed quite deeply. And then when his move to Real Madrid, and now that he's over in Al Nassr,
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. It's always
he's
interesting.
He's going to break that 1,000 goals, I think.
Yeah,
he's going to do it.
Yeah, he's got to get there. He's getting old.
He is.
Speaking about getting old.
I know. I think he's still going to be at the World Cup, though. He's going to... This will be his swan song, I think. But, yeah.
Yeah.
That is exciting. Yeah, your experience of soccer is about the same as mine in American football. I played a couple of games, but one of them was at Christmas time when I first got here, and I broke my wrist. Just playing American. So that's why I haven't done it too much. But I was trying to make a tackle. I made the tackle, but then someone kicked me in the wrist, and I was in a cast for 3 months.
Oh gosh, yeah. I was just gonna say, I think my first kind of intro to soccer was the women's national team with Mia Hamm back in like the late '90s, and then when I was at Asbury University in 2008 to 2011. The Landon Donovan years with the U.S. national team, those are pretty fun and exciting. But yeah, I think one of my memories as a player, which isn't very much, was when Jamie Hood was still in the territory, and I think we were at Pine Summit, and he tried to do like a slide tackle, and he had this huge like burn on his leg. I mean, it was like all over his calf, and he just walked around like
I remember that as well.
Yeah, like it was nothing. I was like, oh my gosh, that's intense.
Yeah, they were fun games. I remember one of them. I scored a goal, and I got very excited. And I remember the first person I ran into was Terran. And I kind of jumped on Tarrant and then grabbed him down, and then he was kind of on top of me, and then the rest of the staff all jumped on top. Now, if anyone doesn't know Tarrant, he's a big lad, and he landed on top of me. And then for the rest of the week, I was thinking, oh man, this isn't good on my ribs. And literally the day after WMI, we went off to Australia, and I realised in Australia they cracked a rib from that game, and and it was just from these kind of overzealous kind of excitement and all
awesome.
that kind of stuff. But it was fun. Yeah, I know. It was good.
Who says WMI isn't exciting?
Exactly.
Moving on to top 3 like music camp moments. You kind of alluded to one earlier. But what are some of your top 3?
All the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I loved music camp. There's no question about that. Just with the kind of getting to work with the young people and all that kind of stuff, and just seeing how they grow and just the impact that you can have in such a small space of time. But one of the real highlights for me was starting this new camp, which was our musical theatre camp. So I don't know how many years ago that would have been, maybe like 2015 or something like that. We decided we needed to have a different camp. We were kind of really oversubscribed, really, from our music camp. And so we wanted to give them another option. And we decided to try and do this musical theatre. Now, it wasn't just a small group of people. It wasn't just like choosing 20 or 30 people to be a member of the cast. We tried to involve the whole camp. So there have been 180 people involved in these musicals. Now, it might only be 30 actors. So that's how we did it. So the main track for those who really wanted to be acting was an audition part. There would be 30. But all the rest of them, so if we had the other remaining 150 people, they were the ones that would provide the music. So they were part of the choir. We'd split them into 3 different choirs. But then on top of that, they would that would be one of their options. They would do 3 options a day. But then they'll do all the other things, anything that was kind of related to the musical. So it would be hair and makeup and costume design.
Right.
And, I was always involved in set design. I would be kind of building the whole set and stuff. And then we'd do kind of journalism. They would kind of print the playbill. Anyway, so it was a lot of fun. Photography, all these different things. So, and everyone really was just working together for this final goal, which was this kind of a big musical at the end.
Was it full age, like 8 to 17?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe we stopped at about 15, maybe 16 and stuff like that. But, and then the real highlight for me is that we managed to put on the Lion King one year, which is crazy. It was the junior Lion King, but it's still, there's no joke. It's still a proper musical, and it was incredible. And we did it kind of the theatre in the round and stuff. All the audience was sitting around it, and but the kids, I mean, considering how much they had to learn, they just did brilliantly. And it was, our special guest was Barbara Allen, and when she first suggested it, I was thinking, I'm not sure. We used to do these kind of like word musicals, had 8 songs, and they were specifically written for the kids and stuff. But she convinced us that we could do it, and she was right. And so that would have been a real.
That was Camp
highlight.
Daly or Camp Craig's at that time.
Yep.
Where was that? Where was that performed?
In Flick Hall.
Oh, Flick Hall. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I know, at the time it was Marty Brown who was the camp director, and that was definitely his favourite camp as well, the musical theatre. And then he used to bring out all the, the special guests, to see camp. That was always the camp that he used to bring out everyone to and stuff. And it was always just a great thing. And I got to just try different things. It wasn't always music, so I was doing a lot of set building and stuff, which I kind of enjoy and stuff. So that was a kind of the whole musical theatre thing is just a highlight, but generally or specifically, I should say, The Lion King. And then another highlight, which is a kind of a music camp, but it's not necessarily the summer one that you might be thinking about, but with part of the Rose Parade. We've done a couple of music camps. Normally, a Rose Parade is not. It's just the people come in, and then we, we get the bands prepared, and then we march. But for a couple of years, we decided to really go for it. And the year that I'm thinking was our centenary. It was 100 years marching. This is a few years ago. I want to say, I don't know,
That was pre-COVID, right?
2019? Yeah, it would be
yeah.
very close. 2019, probably. And we brought in 8 different bands from all across the USA, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. It was either their territorial youth bands or their territorial music camp A bands. And then we brought them in, and then we split them all up. We formed 8 new bands, and then we just did it like an old-fashioned music camp. And the 8 leaders became, the 8 leaders became the different bandmasters and stuff. And the only thing we didn't, well, kind of our one rule was that whoever the bandmaster was, they wouldn't have had any of their kids in their groups. So it was all new people. So if it was Steve Cobb, he couldn't have any UK people in his band, and it's just so that they could experience different leaders and stuff like that. And it was incredible. And I mean, it was a long concert. Each band could play a major work and just a kind of a concert kind of a work, but it was it was a 3-hour special with these 8 different bands performing. And that year on the Rose Parade, we had well over 400 people marching. I mean, it was huge. And if you want to see some of it, there's a kind of a YouTube
I was just about to ask.
clip. Not necessarily the march. You should look at the Bandfest stuff. And that we brought in John Lamb to be able to conduct that because I mean he's a brilliant conductor, but he's also a teacher, and he really put something quite special together there. And we were playing pieces of music that we had really no business of 350 people to try and play together and get it right. But it sounded just amazing, some of the players they had. And that's certainly worth looking up. And I can send you that link if you want to kind of add it to maybe the description of this afterwards. And so that was another incredible highlight.
So how many Rose Parades have you marched in?
I don't know. 28 maybe. Something like that, heading towards kind of the 30 mark. And as bandmaster, I think it was 21, maybe 22 as bandmaster, something like that.
Yeah. I think I stopped around 11 or 12. That was like way too much for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that I'll never catch, like obviously Harry Sparks, he's the one that everyone talks. He did 60 of them. Oh, gosh. 57 of those with the Army and 3 with his high school band. But the current leader is probably Jim Sparks. I think he's well into his 30s.
Oh, wow.
Of how many he's done, and he's still quite a bit younger than me. So yeah, I think it's just a Sparks tradition, the whole, and his kids do it as well and stuff. So it's great. Yeah,
always good fun. Now the best thing about, at least to me, the Rose Parade was always the In-N-Out burger at the end.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah, definitely. And you get that band fest as well. So if you're really involved, you get quite a lot of it throughout that throughout that week, which is great. But it does mean that I don't really eat In-N-Out for the rest of the year because it's a bit trigger. It's a trigger now. You have it, and then it's just kind of all these things just start going through your mind, and about red tunics and lines and all this kind of stuff. And
do you have a favorite year?
Well, I mean, probably the centenary because it was so many groups, But the other very memorable one, I know it rained a little bit this year, but it didn't really rain. The real rain was 2006.
Oh yeah,
that one's extremely memorable. They still talk about it. We had all these kind of ponchos and stuff like that, but they were just useless. It wasn't just a little bit of rain. This was a monsoon that we're going through, and where we marched down in Pasadena is quite a built-up area. So there's lots of big buildings pretty much all the way down the side. But the wind that came down through the different blocks as we kind of passed the buildings, I mean, we were being knocked over almost kind of to the side. And the whole march would be moving to the left, and then we get past the buildings and then try and get... It was crazy. And we had... The band that year was from Eastern Michigan. And, the weather's not too good in Eastern Michigan, and they were they were saying this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
They would never march and such. But, that's the reason the Salvation Army is still in the Rose Parade. That's the urban legend anyway, that it was because there was a very rainy parade many years ago, and the Army band was the only band to finish. In fact, the only group the only entry to finish. And because of that, they've always been given that open invitation for coming back year and year. So no one actually knows if that's true, but that's the line that everyone says, and that's the line that the Rose Parade believe. So it's good enough for us. So.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite year. I marched that year.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah. I remember in between stopping, because while we were waiting for the floats to get unbroken, we would, all the tuba players would have to, and baritone players and euphonium players have to tip their instruments over to let out all the water. And I remember the crowd that year, like they would just come up to us and give us like hot chocolate while we were standing waiting to get moving. But I think that year I had 4 In-N-Out burgers at the end.
I think I might have joined you on that one as well.
It was fantastic.
And the other part of that, not the Salvation Army part, but the Tournament of Roses part of that, is, it never rains. That's what they always say. It never rains. And only on the night before, I mean, they knew the rain was coming, but only on the night before did they realize that none of the grandstands were grounded. So, and it was a lightning storm they were expecting and stuff. So that night, or the day before, at least on the December, they had to go through every single stand and manage to ground them.
Oh my goodness!
And just in case they got, but they did it. They did it before anyone kind of got in there and stuff like that. So that's a story that Bill Flynn will say as well. And
that's
crazy.
Awesome. Okay, so what you already said that you are in charge of like creative elements down at THQ, and you write a specific series that's really geared towards bridging that gap between praise and worship and the brass band. When I was growing up, late 90s, early 2000s in San Diego, as praise and worship was really starting to come into the Salvation Army, kind of mainstream. We always heard about these worship wars, the brass band versus the praise and worship groups, and people were just at odds. It never really kind of made sense to me, but now you're doing something to kind of help bridge that gap. And can we just talk about that a little bit? And what is that called?
Yeah, and just on one point, those worship wars, that's not just a Salvation Army thing. That's across the board.
Right.
Absolutely.
Contemporary, traditional.
So, yeah, absolutely. And so what I was trying to do with this series, and I think we've accomplished this, is we're trying to involve the brass into the, kind of the more contemporary stuff, but without stepping on the worship team's toes too much, because it's, they needed their opportunity to express themselves. They have different ideas of, how this, the song should go. It's not, none of these contemporary groups will play off, kind of these charts, and they have specific notes they have to play. They're reading these, the chord charts, and within those chords and within that structure, they have that freedom to be able to kind of do their own thing and stuff like that. So there is a series which I do like, Hallelujah Chorus. But that is the other way. That one's very much brass band centric.
Yeah.
And the praise team have to fit into what the brass band is doing. This idea is that it's very much the worship team centric, and the brass then would just kind of sit on top of what they're doing. And really, we're kind of, we accomplish 3 things in it. We're trying to do pads. Pads being, in this day and age, there's often someone in a contemporary scene who would just play this kind of a string sound or a kind of a pad sound on just the tonic note, the main note. If you're in the key of C, that would just be a C. That you hold it throughout, and all it does is just adds this warmth and add this color to the sound and stuff. So we'll let the brass band do that. It was just adding these kind of nice chords that are kind of going throughout. They're not going to get in the way of anyone. The guitar players, the keyboard players can do anything over the top of these. And then sometimes we will do more like the punch brass, like the Chicago style, kind of brass that they were doing. So we'll do that. So we have a few hits and stuff like that. And sometimes we'll also just going to, emphasize little bits of the tune that kind of, if we want those words really to be able to kind of stick out and stuff, we're going to do that. And these arrangements, we write them in a way that they're not too difficult. So if you're thinking of, the series that comes out of the South, which is the American Instrumental Ensemble series, their graded series, we're going to fit somewhere between 2 and 3. That's the kind of the graded thing. They're 5 parts, lots of different transpositions. So you can have, an oboe, a violin, and a flute, and a sousaphone, or whatever, and they can all play these parts. And they're still going to be adding color. It's a different color to what the brass band would get at, but it's still just a different color, and that's kind of what we're looking for. And they're supposed to be anyway, quite easy to put together. So the praise and worship team will know their thing. They kind of have to follow the right roadmap, the geography of where they're going, and then the brass kind of just sits over the top. And but it works. It works well. We've got lots of different arrangers that are doing it now, and we release one of these a week. So we're already up to 70 of them. By June, we're going to be hitting 90 of them. And yeah, I think people enjoy them, and it's a subscription thing, so it's very, very cheap. It works out roughly like $2 a chart or something. So we're basically giving them away.
What's the series called?
It is Brass Music Charts.
Yeah. And
brass music charts.
You don't write all of them, you said, right? You
no,
have like a team of
edit.
people.
I certainly edit them all. I probably write half of them. And then we've got a different set of arrangers. I try and push it as much as we can in our own territory here. Last year we had a few out of territory people writing, but as I think it's just a good opportunity for some of our writers that we have in this territory to be able to write, and it's just a good way to start as well, because you can't veer too far off. So it's just kind of a learning kind of different, voice leading and some of the basic things in brass. And then I work with these arrangers as well. Might want to consider this, you might want to consider that. And then we put these things together. And then every chart that comes out as well, we have we tend to have 3 different versions. There's always going to be an original key, and if that's someone like a Chris Tomlin or a Phil Wickham song, that's going to be well out of reach for congregations to be able to sing. So some of these we might even take down a 4th. Then we have what is known as a congregational friendly key. Congregational friendly key we try and keep within C to C. That's kind of what I think the right range is for a congregation to sing. That might mean that it's in a bit of a wicked key for the brass band. So then we always do a brass band key, which is a semitone above that. So if we settle on the key of E for the congregation, the brass band are playing in a whole series of sharps at that point. So we take it up a semitone, all of a sudden it's in the key of F. That's right in the brass band's wheelhouse as well. And if you're a guitar player, you can play an E, just put a capo on, and then you're in good shape. So that's kind of what we do. And then just over the last 4 or 5 weeks as well, I kind of stumbled on the idea of, we might as well just try and get as many keys as we can. So generally, I have to kind of rearrange something from the original key to the congregational key. So there's 2 different versions, and it's just kind of how you stack the chords and stuff.
Right.
But from within them, I just try and release as many as I can. So for instance, Great Things that came out just a few weeks ago, that's got 7 different transpositions on the website now. So hopefully that's enough for anyone, to be able to go in there and just choose the right one for them.
Now, there's no way to automate that, right? Like, you go to Ultimate Guitar Tabs or even like Song Select, and if you want to change a different key, it just does it automatically. You got to do that manually.
Yeah, but it's not too bad. Once I've got those 2 different versions, actually do the manually stuff is not a big big ask, so it just means that I can ensure that it's correct. I've had to put this whole website together and stuff, and my experience of websites before I started the job was just complete zero, so this is kind of what we stumbled on, trying to find something that might be able to do that. Might just be a little bit beyond my capabilities, but we've settled on this. It seems to work really well, and one of the things that we're trying to do now is do a few more demos so people can actually hear what the songs sound like. Where I always have the brass on there, but it's the brass without the track for copyright reasons.
Right.
But now, especially because we've got Nico in the department, we're looking at maybe trying to do some in-house recordings with the brass, just the MIDI brass on top. And, we got one that our first little demo one that we were looking at, and it sounds really good. So I think we're going to try and do that. Then it might involve some people in the territory as well, which is just kind of a little bit of fun for them.
Yeah, so that's awesome. It's not just about the music, though, because I think at least on the U.S. music website, there's accompanying devotions that come with. Is it?
Yeah, we do that.
All of
That's
them,
all on
or
the
is that
brass.
just
Yeah, every single one. Yeah, so
nice?
that's the brass music charts, and this kind of stemmed from the idea of it's really kind of geared towards the worship leader, giving them some ideas about what to say. This is one of my thing. I teach quite a bit on when it comes to worship and stuff. And a guy called Bob Coughlin, who's quite a prominent writer, he will say there's two reasons why people don't sing in the worship set, and it's the wrong song and it's bad leadership. And the bad leadership thing for me is just knowing what to say. How are you going to lead your congregation? And that's where these devotions come in. So we've got some experienced kind of theologians that break the song down, and they just explain what the writer is actually trying to say. So the worship leader can then listen to these and maybe stumble upon an idea that might be a good way for them to lead the song. It's just inviting the congregation. This song, this is what it's trying to tell you. So as we sing this song, please think of these, meditate on these thoughts, and it's something like that. So and that's why we put the devotions in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that they're not very long.
Yeah, well, that was, we've had to, go back to some people and say, yeah, I think you're you're a little bit too long. We try and hit a minute. Sometimes they're a little bit longer. Yeah. I think we even said 100 words. And this, again, I've done this before. I used to do this songbook devotional. So we would take... well, it's exactly what it says. We would take some of these songs from the songbook, the Salvation Army songbook, and some of them, if you read them, they're just so deep in their theological kind of thoughts. When you're singing them, it's impossible for you to try and pull out all these different it's just impossible. So I had these ideas of, asking some kind of prominent people to do just what we're saying. Just, can you break down this kind of song? And then the idea was 100 words on that one. And it was really tough for people to be able to do that. But we stuck with it. And, we had some generals doing it, and we'd have to write back and say, yeah, can you just, shorten that a little bit, and they did. And so that's why I think is knowing what to say, kind of in a kind of a short way, which is I'm probably showing you just what not to do in this podcast as I keep on talking here. But it's just kind of less is more. Yeah,
100 words goes by very quickly.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And thinking about it, actually, maybe the songbook devotional, that might have been 200 words. Thinking about it, I think that might have been 2 minutes. So, yeah, but these ones we try and stick with 100 word.
Yeah. In addition to the brass music charts, I think, is it public knowledge now that you kind of writing like smaller ensembles or easier ensembles? The AIS stuff is graded 1 through 4. Most public schools are graded 1 through 6, I think. Here at least here in the States. But we have found over the last couple of years that even some level 1s were a little out of reach for some of our beginner groups. Yeah. So you started writing a different kind of series. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So we haven't told too many because I'm just waiting. I'll go into that in a little second because we're going to add a different component to that. But it's actually on the brassmusiccharts.com website, and it's called Sound Beginnings. And what Sound Beginnings is a graded 0.5. And the constraints for the writer are quite huge on that one. It's really, they should be able to, any kind of the junior bands, be able to, if you're following one of those books, Standard of Excellence, something like that, after about your 6-week mark, something like that, you should be able to start looking at some of these pieces of music. So it's C to G. That's all it is on every part. So we can't go more than quarter notes, so that's as fast as these things go. We do occasionally stray into a low B or a high A if we really need to, but we try and avoid that as much as we can. And then these pieces can be done with as few as 2 parts. You can have the first and the third part. It's like a duet. The melody is always going to be present within those 2 parts. But then the interesting one is the second part, which is what we've given to the horns. but it's their own part. It's not a doubled part with a cornet, because if it's doubled with the cornet, all of a sudden the horns are playing very, very high.
Right.
And if it's doubled with the third part, then all of a sudden the third parts are playing very, very high. So it's just their own part, again, from C to G, because these horn players, they're learning from the same books of standard of excellence.
Yeah.
They're learning the same notes, C to G, but then all of a sudden you throw them a piece, and then all of a sudden their range is like from G to the high D, and they're all notes that they can't play. So that's kind of what it is. We have short endings, so they might have a 20-bar piece, 20-measure piece. There's also long endings, which might go up to kind of like 40 bars as well. But they're super simple. I think right now there's 4 on the website. There's another one coming up. Jim Black has been starting to write these things, and he's knocking them out. I've got 3 waiting to be edited that we might be able to put on the website soon.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
My goal is to be able to get to about 10 of them. And it's not one that we necessarily have to keep on writing every year for, because the plan is that once these kids have played them, they're going to be moving on to grade 1 pretty quickly. It's not as if it's going to be the same players year after year playing these different grades and stuff. So we're trying to get 10, something like that, really good quality arrangements.
Yeah.
And I think we're close. And I know that we tried this out at the DMD conference, and people seem to really like the idea. So let's see where it goes. But the upside of that is
they're not going to be. It's not going to be a continued.
Well, we are. Well, but it's not like the AIES. They release 16 a year.
Right.
We don't really need to do that, I don't think. Right. Because you run out of tunes pretty quickly that fit in with C and G.
That's true.
But you also run out of ideas. That's the thing, because there's only so many ideas you can do that, kind of keep it interesting within those limitations.
Yeah.
So otherwise they all start sounding very, very similar. And but this is just me speaking right now. It's been going for a month. You never know. People might be really excited about it, and we might just need to do a lot more. But what I was alluding to before about the sound beginnings, that's sound beginnings brass. But we're also going to be looking at more sound beginnings. So what I was doing just before jumping on this podcast here was I was trying to do the website stuff for the sound beginnings piano. So it's the same thing. It's the book that we'd already released many years ago, the Encore piano solos. We're putting that all on the website. It's all free. We're going to give it away. It's got all the demo recordings that David Dumford did for us many years ago, and that's matched with a video of the score. I've written a few over the last couple of years for different, like the Star Search and Encore and all these. We're going to put those on there as well. We're also going to do a Sing Company one. So Sound Beginning Singing Company, and that's going to be more scripture-based songs. So we just, it's just basically one verse that we've done in a kind of a cool way. Again, it's a really easy range for kids, maybe like C to A, something like that. So it's not too high, not too low.
Yeah.
Lots of repeated words, just in a scripture verse. The idea is that you can try it out either Sunday schools or singing companies, but they're quick wins. You put it in the singing company, they should be able to learn that in just a few minutes. But it's really good for new groups, so they don't feel intimidated by having to learn 3 verses. Very wordy songs, and some of the range. I love some of the music coming out from England and stuff, but it's so high, some of that, and it's really tough for kids. But it's the amount of words as well that people don't really think about. It's for young kids to memorize. It's tough. So I've already done 4 or 5 of these when I was the DMD in SoCal. So we're just going to rework those. We'll put some of those on, but then we want lots of people just to do these scripture-based sound beginning songs for sing companies. And then from there, who knows? So then it could be vocal solos. We could do, maybe Nico could start looking at some praise team stuff, just like sound beginnings, just very, very simple songs, 2-chord songs maybe, for sound beginnings that, that you can just start the process of getting a young team together, So, it's just something that we're pretty excited about, and we'll just see where it takes us. But
yeah, I think that's great because, I've been thinking about, I lead music at my core, and outside of one of the kids who plays at high school, none of the kids are involved in school music, and so they only get 35-40 minutes of music instruction once a week, which is not a whole lot in the grand scheme of a year, in the grand scheme of their lifetime. And so, you know, I think when we first started, and even as a DMD, I think I would get so down on myself of like, why, you know, they need to progress faster. But then that's just not the nature of, if they're, you know, if they're not doing other music stuff. So I have found that, you know, if we can get them playing songs just to get them excited beyond like hot cross buns, sooner, and you know, we can retain them a little bit more.
Yeah, and Bill Himes did those things, didn't he? You know, those Muffin Rhapsody and stuff like that. And, you know, what was so good about that is those kids felt really good about themselves, you know, and, you know, they were a part of this. But similar to our Sound Beginnings one, I did one over at, you know, Christmas time. One of the ones is Joyful, Joyful. And I had my beginners just play the first part, but then I brought in other people to play parts 2, 3, and 4. Because I only had cornets. It wasn't that I didn't have they couldn't cope with it or anything. I just had cornets. But all of a sudden they were playing in a band and they felt really good about themselves and it sounded like a proper piece of music and, you know, the parents are all just blown away. So, oh my goodness, this is like 8 weeks. But when you kind of really break it down, man, this is the same. It's basically the same as playing hot cross buns, but we've just made it a little bit longer. Yeah, added some extra parts, and it just sounds really good. And everyone's excited, and they wanted to keep coming back and doing more and stuff. So that's the principle behind it all. Yeah. I think it's great. As the Salvation Army, we have chosen a difficult instrument, though, haven't we? Brass. Blimey, it's difficult. But it's good. It's rewarding. Don't get me wrong. And the community involved in a brass band is amazing. The sound that you can do and some of the music's going there. But out of all the instruments to choose brass, it's tough.
My brother and I were talking about it. He's been a school music teacher for a lot of years now, and you know, we were just talking about how difficult it is to work on brass, because you know, in a school setting, you definitely wouldn't have alto horns, maybe French horns, but not necessarily at, you know, elementary, middle school level, which is where a lot of our kids are. The
clef thing as well. With the treble clef and all that. That's we're constantly running into that.
My son Paxton was thinking about. Well, he's on euphonium now. We've officially made him switch, just because as a need at the core. And he was like, "Oh, you know, I want to play at school." And I said, "Oh, just so you know, you get to play bass clef." And he's asking me what that is, and I was trying to tell him. And I was like, I think I'll just stick with Avid. so he's not even doing music at school. So, and I think Joyful is the encore test piece this year, right, for a beginner band? Is that?
Yeah, it certainly could be. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I must admit that, you know, Derek and Neil do all that. And, so that's good. I'm glad they use it,
Yeah, it's been really accessible. It's actually some of our newer kids, our community kids who've only been playing for like a couple of months, they've joined us on that piece as well. So it's really good. It's really fun to, even for them, you know, who haven't been playing very long, to sit in with, you know, our quote unquote junior band. They've only been playing, you know, 2 years, so they're not that much better. But it just makes it like a cohesive unit. It's fun. So
and you know, as we've been putting together and people have been playing, that we kind of listen to advice as well. You know, someone was asking for kind of the bass clef part 3. Okay, yeah, we can do that, certainly. You know, I hadn't even thought about that. But then one of the other ones, David Dunphy was saying this. He says what he appreciates so much is that everyone's playing all the time. He says when he's teaching beginners, one of the biggest things is rests. Having like the horn players rest for 3 bars. Well, you've got to count for 3 bars and then come in with that note. They're all over the place. It's just not in their wheelhouse at that age to be able to kind of learn and count rests and stuff like that. So that's something that we didn't necessarily plan on. It just happened naturally, but now that's always is in our guidelines. Keep people playing. Don't confuse them by giving these long rests and stuff like that. So so we're learning as we go through.
Yeah, and even the tuba players, you know, because tuba lines tend to be a little bit different. I have found that, you know, if, especially with our kids, you know, if they have something different, they can't play it because they're listening for everyone else. And
Yeah.
it's always interesting.
Now, most junior bands, they're tuba players. You might be a little bit different. Most junior bands, I'm thinking the tuba player is probably a member of staff, but I could be wrong in that one. So the original plan was we could be a little bit freer with the bass part, but it's actually kind of now slotted in quite well just to keep those simple parts. But what we try and do is parts 1, 2, and 3 is to try and keep that rhythm pretty much the same. So they're all kind of now playing. Now, there might be some variances a little bit, maybe parts 1 and 2 will play the same rhythm for a little bit as the tune is being played in part 3, and that might take a little bit of getting used to, but generally we try and keep those rhythms pretty cohesive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and we've kind of talked about this already, why we needed sound beginnings, but let's kind of talk about this more, in depth of just general music writing in the Salvation Army. And you've been a composer for a long time, right? I mean, it's kind of...
Yeah, that's what I did at university. Yeah, that was my major at university. So I was a composition major.
And one of the conversations I had with Gavin Whitehouse, who's also a composer at the DMD conference in January, was how difficult it is to... there's great literature in the Triumph series, General series. There's so many gems. Festival series, like... It feels like the better the band gets, just the richer the music gets. But how difficult it is to write like really good quality music. Now, I'm not a composer, so I have zero knowledge of how difficult this actually is. But a lot of our bands are in the Unity series kind of level, and it can be difficult finding like really rich music in those series. Do you have any like on thoughts on like why it's seemingly easier to like write for a bigger band as opposed to like a Unity series?
Well, absolutely. It's you just got more parts to play with. I mean, that's the simple thing. Unity series, you're pretty restricted about what you can do because your second part has to be able to be played by both horns and cornets. So you can't go too high or too low because if there's a band that doesn't have a horn and it has to be played by a cornet, it's those things. So immediately parts 2 and 3, you've got to be pretty careful about kind of what you're writing in those parts. Parts 1, 4, and 5, that's obviously the cornets and the euphonium and bass. You can be a little bit freer. But yeah, it's just those 5 parts. Now you can be, clever a little bit, to say, well, trombone's preferred at this point. So if you want that brighter sound and that, the third part, you can do that. Same thing with the second parts and all those kind of stuff. But also Unity series, you're not going to write the same level of difficulty that you're going to write for the solo cornet and a general or a festival series part, part 1.
Right.
So you've got to, again, it's a range thing, but it's also, how long are your chops going to last? If you're just one player, how many breaks can you give that player? But then if you give the cornets 8 bars off, then you're maybe down to, 3 parts trying to kind of fill out something else, So you've got to think very carefully about this. And sure, Unity series is 5, so you've got a little bit more, but AIS is only 4 parts.
Yeah.
The 5th part, the euphonium, is an optional, so you've got to be able to put everything in 4 parts. So then again, you're even, you have to be even more careful. But it can be done. But most young composers, and I was the same, so I completely understand it. The pieces they want to write is for the ISB to play. We see this all the time when we go through, like the Composers Forum, or I mentor lots of people, composers that come through and stuff, and I work with them. And so often, they're writing these festival series numbers that these days, it's probably only 10 army bands in the whole army world that be able to play these things, and you think, all right, you got some good ideas, but that's one of the first things I was saying, who's going to play this? Who are you aiming this for? Because for me as a composer, it's great. Don't get me wrong. To hear the ISB record on your pieces, it's certainly
sure.
a feather in your hat, and it feels great. There's no question. But really, you're going to want that piece to be played. So now as I get a little bit older, I take just as much pride, and I'm not just saying this. This is not just me trying to come up with a good line. This is 100% true. I get just as much pride, healthy pride, I should say, of writing a brass music chart or as a sound beginnings piece as I would a festival series piece. I will spend just as much trying to craft it to be able to just get it just right and be just as happy with the result on something as like a beginner piece or a Unity series piece than I would on some big kind of major work that, again, that only 5 or 6 bands might be able to play. And I think for the younger composers, they're not thinking that way. And so, again, going back to those mentoring things, I would say, who are you writing this for? Let's break this down. Let's see, what are your ideas? You've got some good ideas. Let's simplify it. Let's try and see if you can kind of do on the fewer parts. I was working with someone in Africa just this week, and his, I think it was Triumph series and stuff, but he had lots of different ideas and stuff, good ideas, and says, right, let's just kind of take a step back, do those first 8 bars again, but try and just do it in 5 parts for me, and just see what is needed. What are you trying to say? What do you really need? And let's see if you can do it that way. And that's it. It's a different skill set, and it's a skill set that's not as fun. And the other issue, is, of course, is Sibelius can play anything. It doesn't matter what you put into Sibelius, it's going to play it. And with like Note Performer, which is this brilliant kind of a sound library that you use, it's going to sound amazing.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you put it in front of players, you go, oh my gosh, we just, why doesn't it sound the same? I often find that as a trombone player, I've got an idea how this piece should sound, but it never sounds like that from my trombone seat. I'm thinking, oh man, the basses need to be doing this. It's just because I'm further away. Now, if I was in the middle of the group, it would sound like I wanted it. So it's kind of a weird thing. But yeah, that's the issue. There's so many good things about MIDI and Finale and Dorico and Sibelius and all this kind of stuff. But one of the issues is that it can play anything.
Speaking of styles, I've had the privilege of playing a lot of your music, having grown up in SoCal and on the West. And you write in quite a lot of styles. What is do you have like a preferred style to write or like a more natural style of writing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people kind of often they say that I'm kind of, got a lot of jazz ideas or kind of Latin kind of flavors and stuff like that. And it's true. I do love all that kind of music. So when I try and write, I often just try to find something different. What am I going to do with this music that maybe hasn't kind of been done and all this kind of stuff. So, for instance, for the TYB, I just did a transcription of kind of an elevation rhythm song called Washed. It's one that's on Spotify is getting extremely popular at the moment, and that's just a really good upbeat kind of funky worship tune. It's not one that will probably go into brass music charts, I wouldn't say. It's more probably ideal for youth councils and and that kind of stuff, in the same way as Goodbye Yesterday. It's that kind of style and stuff like that. But it's really good. I don't think it's necessarily for a Sunday morning. Again, maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of what I'm thinking. But again, this is just to give you the point of always trying to do something a little bit different. How am I going to approach this a little differently? So at the end of that one, I've done this whole breakdown solo section. So I've written this kind of 8-bar vamp thing for the band, and they've got options to have the bright instruments or the mellow instruments, and I've written out a whole different bunch of solos. And I'm thinking this is from like a music camp thing. You can just point to that right horn, go for it, and then the band will know kind of what parts to play, and then the horn just gives it a go, and it's just kind of a fun thing and stuff. But we're having tuba solos and baritone solos and euphonium solos. Now in performance, I would suggest you use 2 or 3 of them, but in that kind of a rehearsal setting, it could just be something. Now, I haven't seen that done before, so that's just something that I'm, kind of looking to do. But the other thing I'm looking to do as well, I was looking at this last week, is to do exactly what you're talking about, is write a whole bunch of Unity series pieces that are suitable for Sunday morning and stuff, because at Tustin Ranch right now, which is the core I go to, and we're always just looking out for the right pieces that would work for an ensemble, that if not everyone's there, we can play the Unity series and stuff like that. So the whole kind of the jazz, the Latin stuff that I love to write, that certainly came when I was the DMD. I had really looked at that at all when I was in England. I mean, it's not, certainly was not part of my education. We are still blown away by Light Walk, with the kind of the swing tune and and all that kind of stuff. But really, I've got to credit Bill Gordon with a massive influence on me. He did these kind of brass charts. We ended up doing a group called the California Brass Company. I think that's what it's called. I'm sure it is. California Brass Company. And we recorded about 20 of Bill's charts, which were, 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, a whole rhythm section and stuff. And it was amazing just to see what he was doing in that realm, just how he was kind of writing for it and stuff. And that was just a huge inspiration for me. And from that point on, I started, kind of dabbling in all that kind of stuff and just kind of expanding my kind of harmonic language, I guess. And that's kind of later on in life, that's just kind of where my interests have gone, and I'm much more writing kind of like the short concert things. I've done a couple of big kind of major works and stuff, and while I enjoy that, I think there's plenty of those. I think there's so many composers that are kind of writing those.
That's true.
And that's good. And so many of these will have such a short shelf life, because everyone's competing in the same area for just a few bands to be able to play these things. Yeah. And, I'm just, now it might change. I might start doing some of those one day in the future. But for now, that's not where I feel I should be doing my writing. It's more just the kind of the accessible, listener friendly, that kind of stuff, So that's kind of why I've settled on that. Although I don't want to get too much of a reputation about it, because I kind of know that I'm known as that kind of guy, So that's kind of where the Unity series is coming from as well, because I want kind of more devotional things going in that.
Now, your dad and your parents were the generals of the Salvation Army. From, do you remember the years? I don't recall. I'm sorry. Yeah,
no, it's okay. It's 2002 to 2006.
So you were already DMD here in SoCal.
Yeah.
Could you just talk about a little bit, because your dad is attributed to a lot of his own music, a lot of musicals. They wrote
He did
Spirit,
10
right?
musicals. Yeah, he did. Yeah. Well, it was him and John Gowns.
Right.
John Gowns, another general who came before Dad, just the one before, and the two of them would write these musicals. And even Dad would say he wrote this in his autobiography, that he's had some amazing experiences. He's had these incredible opportunities in ministry and stuff. But he would even say the musicals would be his greatest ministry, the greatest impact that he's ever had, would be the music that he was able to write with John Gowns, and those in the songbook now, or in the tune book, I think there's 30 or 40 of their songs in the songbook, which is a massive percentage, really. And so there was 10 musicals, not all full length. There was a mini musical in there as well, The White Rose. But so many of the songs have lasted the years, and people are still singing them to this day, which is good. And even though I did grow up in that, I was very young when all this was really happening. So kind of in my teenage years, when this might have been a little bit more of interest to me, they were pretty much kind of done by that point. There was one they did for the 1990 Congress called The Meeting. There's not necessarily the most well-known songs from that musical. That was still a good musical and stuff like that. But and really, by the time his career, if you want to call it that, his officership, as it kind of really started taking off at that point, became territorial commander, and then, all these, the chief, general stuff, the writing had to take a bit of a backseat on that one.
Right.
So that was kind of the main writing, was probably mid-60s to, I don't know, mid-80s, probably. That was probably those 20 years was incredible output. And I would have been, by the end of that, I would have been about 12 years old, So still, I mean, I know all the songs. I arrange a lot. I've had the privilege of working with Dad on different things. We've had some projects together. We did one called the Kevin Larsson 21st Century, which is kind of big band kind of versions of a lot of his songs. And we put this on in London together, and then we did some recordings, and so that's a massive, obviously a huge influence in my musical journey, and I'm sure that's one of the main reasons that I took on composition.
Yeah.
And but then I kind of gone my own way. I think Dad only ever wrote one brass band thing. His was all, that was a conversation that he had with Trevor Davis, who was a very prominent writer. They were on the train on the way home, and they were just talking about writing for brass. And Dad was saying, I think I really want to give this a go. He said, oh, yeah, you should try it. And then the next day, when they got on the train to go back to work, he'd finished his one piece, which was It's New. Isn't that, the grey favourites? And that's kind of stood the test of time. And, that's his one brass band composition.
That's funny. Yeah, one of my favorite marches is the March Mission, and it features that Bill Booth's Army song.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's...
from the Blood of the Lamb.
Yeah. And I don't hear that song played very much, but it's such a good piece. I love that song.
Well, a lot of the songs they wrote... See, I'm surprised that even made it into a march, because a lot of the songs they wrote, they're telling the story in the musical. Now, they would do deliberate songs that they would call standalone songs. So they knew they were going to write this song because they wanted it to have a life after the musical. But a song like Bill Booth's Army, that is 100% part of the narrative of the musical.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to sing that one on a Sunday morning. It's a great song. It's fun and stuff, but it serves no other purpose really than taking the story from A to B in the Blood of the Lamb. So it's interesting that someone's used it for a march.
Yeah, it's funny.
Maybe it's a slightly older march. I don't know if people would do that anymore. I don't know. It's interesting. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a good piece, and that song really kind of just works in it. I've never...
Yeah. In fact, for my parents' retirement, I did some arranging for it, and I did this big choral piece, and that was one of the songs I featured, actually.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, Bill Booth, I know. Yeah.
What do you, as we wind down here, what do you kind of hope to leave as like your legacy, your musical legacy?
I think musical would be, crossing that bridge, I think, from the brass. I think there's no question that you can see that, the kind of the brass ministry across the world is declining. It is. There's no, we can say whatever. We can kind of come up with a variety of excuses of why that's happening. But the reality is that it is. There's no question about that. But I don't think it needs to. I do think that the repertoire that we have access to might be part of that, might be, because, the contemporary music scene is wonderful. It's an incredible scene. And, more people are talking about worship these days than they ever have before, since these kind of it's almost a revival, they started in the early 70s, and, Chris Tomlin, Phil Wickham, all these people are filling stadiums of people singing, and people are unabashedly talking about Jesus and worshiping, and it's an incredible thing, and we just need to jump on that.
Yeah,
and that's why I don't think that the brass is dead, because I think this is the whole reason for the brass music charts. I mean, we have orchestras at these calls. I mean, sure, they're all brass, but it's the same thing. You look at Hillsong, how big they were for so many years. They would have these big choirs and the big orchestra and the kind of the worship teams. We can do that. Hillsong that was born out of the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
That was Salvationists that started that.
Yeah.
So all they did was taken the kind of the Salvation Army principles and use it for them and just kind of really went with it. That's kind of, why haven't we done the same thing? And that's kind of what brass music charts is. It's a way of utilizing what we already have and putting it into a place that we already know that is having an incredible impact across the world. So maybe that's kind of when I think about the musical legacy, if there's a way that that we can use this beautiful gift of the Salvation Army brass band that God has given us and use it in this kind of a new way, and who knows, it might really take off again. Maybe the brass will start growing because people will come to the core and say, "Oh, I want to be part of that."
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that's really exciting. What can I do to be part of that? The contemporary, the worship team, you're limited with how many instruments you can have in that. You might be looking at 6 or 7 instruments. You can have a few vocalists for sure. But if you have someone who's passionate about playing the instrument, all of a sudden, it says, we can do that. It doesn't have to be brass. It could be anything. You can throw violins in there. We've got all the parts. So maybe I would be very happy with that legacy if there was a way that we, kind of just, bring new life into that.
Yeah. And I think it's a great start, having things that are accessible that kids can play or people can play, very, without having to be on the instrument for a lot of years, it's, it takes a long time to get to a certain level, but if kids can start playing and being part of groups, almost immediately, I think that'll go a long way into preserving kind of like our musical heritage, talking about legacies and stuff like that. I think that'll go a long way. So yeah, I'm excited to see how brass music charts and Sound Beginnings like changes the landscape.
Yeah, we need to get some arrangements from you. I know that you had an interest in the past, so we just
I was actually thinking
keep
about
on
that.
Plugging. Yeah,
and I was because I think you had asked me to do All Creatures of Our God. No, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I can't remember it. Yeah.
But it was too involved. That's just how my mind is.
That's the thing.
My mind is just like all over the place.
So if you I could sit down with anyone who's got a good musical knowledge like yourself, and then we could easily break it down, and then you'd see how easy this can be, and it's fulfilling as well. It's wonderful to be able to kind of hear that again. That's having the right type of pride, but able to hear your kind of music is an exciting thing, and certainly very rewarding. So I want to make that accessible.
I guess that's a challenge. I'll accept it.
Excellent. Very good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to more music.
Yeah, great. All right.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. That is episode 15. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Kevin Larsson. I've known Kevin for quite a long time, and not only as a musician, but as a fellow colleague and friend. And so it's been nice to get to catch up a little bit, talk about his music and what he's doing for the Salvation Army. That's it for now. Till next time.
In the heart of the rain and evergreen trees, the mountains meet the sea, a place of peace. Melodies rising like the morning mist. We gather to learn, create, and exist. Beyond the sound, beyond the stage, we lift our voices, turn the page.